Picture a couple in their late 20s sitting at a kitchen table in Vaughan, Ontario. It is 2020. Mortgage rates are 1.59% on a 5-year fixed. Every real estate agent in the Greater Toronto Area is telling them the same thing.
Get in now. Prices only go up. If you wait, you will be priced out forever.
They cannot afford a house. Nobody their age can afford a house. But there is a product designed specifically for them. It is called a pre-construction condominium. The pitch is simple. Sign a contract today for a unit that does not exist yet. Put down 20% as a deposit. Wait 3 to 5 years while the developer builds it. By the time it is finished, the unit will be worth more than you paid. You will have built equity before you even move in. They sign. They hand over $130,000. 5 years of savings. Everything they have. 5 years later, the unit is finally ready. The appraiser walks through the door. The condo they contracted to buy for $675,000 is now worth $590,000. The bank will not lend them the full amount because the collateral no longer supports the loan. They need to find $85,000 in cash to bridge the gap. They do not have $85,000. Nobody in their tax bracket has $85,000 sitting in a drawer. They ask the developer to let them assign the unit to another buyer. The developer refuses. They ask for an extension. Denied. They receive a letter from a law firm demanding payment on a property they cannot afford and did not build. They're not alone. 28,000 pre-construction condominiums are scheduled to complete in the Greater Toronto Area in 2026. Experts estimate that up to 35% of buyers will default. That is nearly 10,000 families facing the same trap. The same letter, the same math. This is not a housing crash. This is a deposit harvesting system operating exactly as it was designed. The developer carries zero risk. The lender carries zero risk. The buyer carries all of it. Today, we audit the blueprint. We trace the mechanism. And we answer the question nobody in the real estate industry wants you to ask. Who is the system actually built for? 1. The mechanism. To understand how 10,000 families are about to lose their life savings, you have to understand the machine they were fed into. A pre-construction condominium contract is not a purchase. It is a financing instrument disguised as a real estate transaction. Here's how the mechanism works. The developer announces a project. The building does not exist. There are no walls, no plumbing, no foundation. There's a rendering, a sales center, and a contract. The buyer signs that contract and begins paying deposits in installments. 5% in 30 days, another 5% in 120 days, another 5% in a year, another 5% at occupancy. By the time the building is finished, the buyer has handed over 20% of the purchase price, often $100,000 or more, in cash. The developer takes that deposit money and uses it to finance construction. The buyer's life savings become the developer's working capital. This is the first layer of the trap. You are not buying a home. You are lending money to a construction company at 0% interest with no equity stake and no voting rights. The second layer is the appraisal gap. The mortgage is not arranged when you sign the contract. It is arranged 3 to 5 years later when the unit is ready to close. If the market has risen, your unit appraises at or above the purchase price, and the bank lends you the money. If the market has fallen, the appraisal comes in lower than your contract price. The bank will only lend against the appraised value. The difference between what you owe and what the bank will lend is the gap. You must fill that gap with cash, or you lose everything. The third layer is the legal asymmetry. The contract is enforceable. If you cannot close, the developer keeps your deposit. Then the developer can resell the unit to someone else at the new market price. Then the developer can sue you for the difference between the original contract price and whatever they eventually sell it for. You lose the deposit, you lose the unit, and you may owe additional damages on top. One real estate lawyer in Toronto told the CBC that out of every client she has represented in this situation, only one has ever successfully assigned a pre-construction purchase to another buyer. Just one. The system is not broken. The risk was designed to flow in one direction from the beginning. Tell me in the comments, did you or someone you know buy pre-construction? What happened when it came time to close? 2. The flood. The scale of what is about to hit the Greater Toronto Area has no precedent in modern Canadian history. Toronto condominiums have fallen 25% from their peak in 2022. In the 905 suburbs, Vaughan, Brampton, Markham, Mississauga, the collapse is even steeper. Assignment sales are closing at 10 to 30% below the original pre-construction price. Investors who purchased units in 2022 and 2023 are staring at losses of 30 to 40%. Some buyers at developments like Lynx Condominiums are facing losses exceeding $200,000 per unit. The inventory is staggering. The Toronto condo market is carrying 7 months of supply, the highest level in 20 years. 31,000 new units completed in 2025 alone. Another wave is arriving in 2026, and the buyers who were supposed to absorb this supply are gone. New condominium sales in the GTA have plummeted to a 34-year low. Activity levels not seen since 1991. 4 out of every 5 leveraged investors who closed on newly completed GTA condos in the last 2 years were cash flow negative. They were losing an average of $600 a month. The rental income did not cover the mortgage, the condo fees, and the property taxes. They were bleeding money every single month, hoping the unit would appreciate enough to cover the loss when they sold. It did not. Rents have fallen 10% from their 2023 peak. The math collapsed. If you watched our audit called the Polite Ponzi Scheme, you already know the architecture. The Canadian housing market is a yield farm where the newest entrants finance the returns of those who arrive before them. Pre-construction was the most aggressive expression of that machine. The youngest buyers were told they were building equity. They were building someone else's balance sheet. 3. The developer's shield. Now we trace who actually bears the consequences when the market turns. The developer sells units at peak pricing. The deposits fund construction. If the market holds or rises, the developer delivers the units, the buyers close, and everyone profits. If the market crashes, the developer still holds the deposits. The developer can enforce the contracts. The developer can deny assignment requests. The developer can terminate the agreement, keep the deposit, and resell the unit. This is not a risk-sharing arrangement. This is a one-way valve. The most spectacular example is the one tower at Yonge and Bloor. Mizrahi Developments defaulted on $1.23 billion in loans after total project debt reached nearly $1.7 billion. Construction stalled at roughly 40 stories. That is a developer failure, and yet the buyers who put deposits into that project face their own losses on top of the developer's collapse. Across the GTA, the carnage is systemic. Active construction projects dropped from 206 to 135. 35,000 construction jobs vanished. Only 22 new projects launched in 2024 compared to 69 the year before. In the first quarter of 2025, just 2 projects launched, totaling 275 units. Construction starts have collapsed 84% from 2 years ago. The pipeline is dying, and the developers who are still standing are not absorbing the pain. They are enforcing contracts against buyers who signed in a different economic universe. As we showed in Ontario is breaking, the province's economy was already fracturing under the weight of stagnant wages, collapsing industrial output, and a housing market that consumed every dollar of productive investment. The pre-construction collapse does not create a new crisis in Ontario. It detonates the one that was already ticking. Do you think the pre-construction system should be reformed, or is this just the market correcting? Tell me in the comments. 4. The blind auction. There's another layer to this machine that most Canadians do not fully understand. Pre-construction condos are sold at fixed prices through developer sales centers and VIP allocation events, not through bidding wars. So how did buyers end up paying peak prices for units that did not exist? Because the resale market pushed them there. The way homes are sold in this country is itself a mechanism designed to inflate prices beyond rational value. And it herded an entire generation toward pre-construction as the only escape. For roughly 100 years, the Canadian real estate system worked on a simple model. A seller listed a home at a price they wanted. Buyers offered less. There was negotiation. Both sides moved. A deal was struck. It was transparent and it was functional. Then the industry adopted the blind bidding system. The seller lists below what they actually want. The real estate agent manufactures urgency. Showings are compressed into a single weekend. Offer night is set for Tuesday or Wednesday. 20 offers come in, 30 offers, 40. None of the buyers can see what anyone else is bidding. The bids climb past rational value because fear of losing overrides the math. Bully offers arrive before the deadline. $2 million for a house listed at 1.5, take it or leave it in 24 hours. Every person who won one of those blind auctions between 2020 and early 2022 is now underwater. They are the most financially damaged Canadians in the country. They paid the highest prices in history for homes that have since lost 20 to 30% of their value. The 905 suburbs were ground zero. The bidding was the most aggressive and the collapse has been the steepest. Now that the market has turned, the same agents are running the same playbook in reverse. List a home at $749,000 when the seller will not accept a dollar under $1 million. Generate showings. Collect 15 offers, all far below what the seller would ever consider. Then post on social media that you received multiple offers. The market is back. The frenzy is returning. It is not returning. The agents are manufacturing the appearance of demand in a market that is collapsing under its own inventory. The blind bidding system inflated the bubble on the way up. Now it is disguising the severity of the crash on the way down. The real estate oligopoly does not lose. It earns commission on the sale regardless of whether the buyer is making a catastrophic financial decision. The agent who facilitated a $2 million blind bid in 2021 earned roughly $100,000 in commission. The buyer, who is now $300,000 underwater, earned nothing. Young Canadians watched this insanity and made what they thought was the rational choice. They stopped competing in the blind auction and walked into a developer's sales center instead. They traded the bidding war for the blueprint. They thought they were escaping the trap. They were walking into a different one. 5. The generation tax. Pull the lens back and look at who is actually trapped inside this machine. It is not wealthy investors. The wealthy investors had diversified portfolios and professional advisors who pulled them out early. The people trapped in the pre-construction collapse are young Canadians in their 20s and 30s who were told by every institution in the country, the banks, the developers, the government, the media, that home ownership was the path to financial security. They saved for years. They sacrificed vacations, delayed starting families, worked second jobs. They accumulated $100,000 or $130,000 in deposits. And they handed that money to a developer who used it as free construction financing, knowing that if the market turned, the buyer, not the developer, would absorb the loss. If you watched our audit called The Childless Economy, you know that the cost of housing is the primary reason young Canadians are not having children. The birth rate has collapsed to the lowest level in recorded history. Young people cannot afford to start families because every dollar goes to rent or mortgage payments in a market that was deliberately inflated by cheap credit, blind bidding, and speculative pre-construction sales. The pre-construction trap is the final stage of that mechanism. It does not just take your monthly income, it takes your accumulated savings. The deposit you spent 5 years building is gone. The credit score you maintained is destroyed. The legal action the developer files follows you for years. The dream of ownership, the one thing that was supposed to make all the sacrifice worth it, becomes the instrument of your financial destruction. This is the generation tax. It is not legislated. It is not voted on. It is embedded in the architecture of a housing market that treats the youngest and most vulnerable buyers as raw material. 6. The verdict. Elbows up. The ledger is open. The math is on the table. 28,000 pre-construction units completing in 2026. Up to 35% default rate. 10,000 families staring at appraisal gaps they cannot bridge. Deposits of $100,000 or more, gone. Legal action from developers who face zero consequences for selling units into a bubble they helped inflate. a blind bidding system that drove prices 30% above rational value and is now disguising the collapse. An entire generation of young Canadians whose savings have been converted into developer balance sheets. The construction industry has lost 35,000 jobs. Starts have collapsed 84%. New condo sales are at a 34-year low. 4 out of 5 investors are bleeding $600 a month in negative cash flow. The One Tower, the most ambitious condo project in Canadian history, defaulted on $1.23 billion in debt. And the system tells you this is a correction. It is not a correction. A correction implies the system was functioning and temporarily deviated, and this system never deviated. It operated exactly as designed from the beginning. The developer uses your deposit to build. The agent earns commission on the inflated sale. The bank lends against the appraisal, not the contract. And when the gap opens, you fall through it alone. The blueprint was never yours. You paid for the paper it was printed on, but the building belongs to someone else's balance sheet. A country that treats home ownership as the primary vehicle for middle-class wealth, and then designs a purchasing system where the buyer absorbs 100% of the downside risk, is not a free market. It is a managed extraction. The youngest citizens fund the construction. The oldest citizens collect the returns. And when the math breaks, the youngest citizens are handed the bill and told it was their choice. The receipt is in your hand. The amount is 6 figures. The home does not exist. And the developer's lawyer is already drafting the letter. The system is not broken. It was built this way. Drop a like so more young Canadians see this before they sign a contract they cannot escape. Subscribe for the economic truths nobody else will say out loud. And tell me in the comments, if you bought pre-construction, what would you tell someone who is thinking about signing today? I am Hawk, and I will see you in the next one.